We need a break from you, Dad. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My own daughter, Susan, couldn't even look at me when she said it. There I was, hosting dinner for her and her husband's family, using my good china, my best wine, and they were sitting at my table planning a vacation that excluded me entirely. Let me back up and tell you how I got to that moment. I'm Charles Hoffman, 62 years old, and what happened next taught my family the most expensive lesson of their lives. You know how some dinners just feel off from the start? This was one of those nights. I'd set the table with the good dishes, the ones Linda and I got as a wedding gift 37 years ago. White porcelain with that thin gold rim, only 2 pieces chipped after all these years, which says something about how careful we'd been with them. The evening light was coming through those same curtains Linda hung in 2010, casting everything in this warm, amber glow that used to make her smile. I'd spent the afternoon making Susan's favorite pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the exact recipe her mother had perfected before the cancer took her 10 years ago. Linda always said the secret was browning the meat just right and adding a splash of red wine to the gravy. I still follow her recipe to the letter. The name cards were positioned at each place setting, carefully printed in my best handwriting. Small touches matter, you know. At least they used to matter to my family. They showed up 20 minutes late, which should have been my first clue. Andrew pushed through the door first. That's my son-in-law, Andrew Peterson. Susan trailed behind him with her phone already glued to her hand like it was a life support device. His parents followed close behind. Barbara in some silk blouse that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a month, and George wearing a blazer with those shiny gold buttons that screamed money. The way they looked around my dining room reminded me of tourists walking through a historical house. You know, that polite but distant interest in how the poor folks used to live. My dated wallpaper, my framed photos of Susan and Andrew through the years, everything got that same careful inspection. Charles. Andrew's handshake was one of those quick, dismissive things, the kind that says he's got better places to be. Thanks for having us. Of course, I said. Please, sit down. Dinner's ready. Now, I'd thought about the seating arrangement carefully. Susan to my right, where she'd always sat as a kid, Andrew beside her, his parents across the table. The head of the table was still mine, at least in theory. I brought out the roast on Linda's good serving platter, steam rising up and filling the room with that rich, homey smell. You'd think after 10 years I'd stop setting the table for one more person out of habit, but some things just stick with you. This looks quaint, Barbara said, and I caught her eyes scanning the walls, taking inventory of everything that hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. The way she said quaint, well, let's just say it wasn't a compliment. I'm glad the promotion came through, Susan, I said, trying to steer towards something positive. You worked hard for it. She barely glanced up from whatever was so fascinating on her phone screen. These things happen when you network properly. Now that stung more than she knew. See, I'd made 3 phone calls to old buddies from my electrical contracting days, spent 2 hours talking to a facilities manager who owed me a favor, all to make sure her application landed on the right desk at the right time. But she figured it was all her networking skills. That's when Andrew reached for the wine bottle I'd brought out, a 2015 Napa Cabernet that I'd picked specifically for tonight. Cost me $60, which is more than I usually spend on a bottle, but I wanted everything to be perfect. He picked up that bottle like he was some kind of wine expert, examining the label with his eyebrows raised. Now this is a decent vintage, he announced. Finally something worth drinking in this place. Then he started pouring. Barbara first, then George, then Susan. The bottle made this careful circle around the table, completely skipping my glass, before Andrew set it down at the far end, well out of my reach. Susan watched this whole thing happen. She said absolutely nothing. Andrew has such refined taste, Barbara chimed in, taking a sip and making this appreciative sound. We raised him to appreciate quality. George leaned back in his chair and started studying my dining room with the expression of someone appraising an estate sale. Charles, have you ever considered updating this place? We just redid our kitchen, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. The resale value alone makes it worthwhile. That's when Barbara reached out and touched my curtains, rubbing the fabric between her thumb and finger like she was testing its thread count. These curtains are wonderful, she said in that tone people use when they're being polite about something they think is hideous. They must be what, 15 years old? They work fine, I managed to say. I watched Andrew shift his chair then, the legs scraping against my hardwood floor as he angled himself toward his parents, creating this little wall with Susan trapped in the middle. And you know what? She turned to match his position, so now her back was partially to me. That's when the bomb dropped. I passed the potatoes, and Andrew took the bowl without even glancing my way. That's when he dropped his big announcement. "So, big news," he said, grinning at his parents like a kid showing off a good report card. "We're doing a family vacation. Lake Tahoe, week-long trip. Me, Susan, Mom, Dad. We leave on the 21st. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. You know that feeling when your brain needs a second to catch up with what your ears just heard? That was me right then. "That sounds wonderful," I managed. "What resort?" "Pine Ridge Lodge," Andrew said, getting more animated now, gesturing with his wine glass. My wine glass, technically. 5-star place, private beach access, the whole 9 yards. He paused, and here's where it gets good. We only had budget for 4 people, us and my parents. Let me do that math for you. 4 tickets, 4 people listed. The exclusion wasn't some oversight or budget constraint they were apologizing for. It was deliberate, calculated. "I can cover my own expenses," I said, keeping my voice as level as I could. "I'd love to join the family." That's when Susan's phone slid across the table toward Barbara. Vacation photos were loading on the screen, you know, those perfect resort pictures that make everything look like paradise. Susan turned even further away from me, leaning in to point out spa packages and golf courses to Barbara. When she finally spoke, she still wouldn't look at me. "We need a break from you, Dad." I swear the room just contracted around those words. Barbara and George suddenly found their dinner plates absolutely fascinating. Andrew jumped in quick with that fake apologetic tone people use when they're not actually sorry. "It's not personal, Charles, you know how it is. Just quality time with the immediate family." My hand had been reaching for the serving dish. I watched it freeze in midair like it belonged to someone else entirely. Slowly, I lowered it back to my lap. The pot roast was sitting there untouched on my plate, the gravy starting to congeal. All that work, Linda's recipe, the careful timing, none of it mattered now. "Of course," I heard myself saying. "I understand." I stood up, my chair scraping back against the floor. "Let me get dessert." Nobody protested. Not one person said, "Oh, Charles, don't worry about dessert," or "Why don't you sit and we'll figure this out?" Andrew was already refilling wine glasses. Everyone's except mine, naturally. I walked toward the kitchen, my plate still full of food I'd spent hours preparing. Through the doorway, I could hear Barbara asking about spa packages and George suggesting golf excursions. Susan's laugh floated over it all, light and easy, the way it used to sound when she was 12, and I'd take her for ice cream after school, just because. But I didn't go to the kitchen. I walked right past it, down the hall, up the stairs to my bedroom. Behind me, the conversation kept flowing like I'd never been part of it in the first place. I closed my door and sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing that same sport coat I'd worn to Susan's wedding 5 years ago. Same one I wore to her promotion dinner last month. The same jacket Andrew's family had spent the evening subtly mocking. Through the floorboards, I could hear more laughter, the clink of glasses touching. My wine, my table, my home. Their celebration of excluding me from their lives. You know what's funny? I wasn't even angry yet. I was just empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out whatever had been keeping me upright for the past 10 years since Linda died. The house went quiet around 10 p.m. I heard doors closing downstairs. They were staying in my guest rooms, of course. Too much wine to drive home safely. My wine. I sat there on the bed's edge, sport coat finally off, draped over the chair where I'd laid out my clothes that morning. I'd been hopeful then, thinking this dinner might bring us closer together. Sleep wasn't coming. I knew that already. I took off my reading glasses, cleaned them with my shirt, put them back on. The bedroom looked exactly like it had for the past 10 years, ever since Linda passed. Her jewelry box still sat on the dresser, empty now. I'd had to sell everything inside to cover her final hospital bills. The insurance didn't cover everything, you know how that goes. Susan had been 22 then, fresh out of college, crying through the whole funeral. I'd held her hand during the entire service. Somewhere along the way, though, her hand had let go of mine. The memories started coming in pieces, sharp, disconnected fragments that hurt to touch. The wedding, $25,000, most of my savings at the time. Susan in that white dress, absolutely radiant. Andrew looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. I'd written that check thinking, this is what fathers do. This is love you can hold in your hands. Then the car. $8,000 for the down payment on their BMW. The same car they'd driven past my house last Christmas without stopping, heading to Andrew's parents for dinner. Just a loan, Dad. We'll pay you back soon. That was 3 years ago. I'd stopped asking about repayment after the first year. The furniture for their first apartment. That emergency roof repair when their contractor disappeared with half the money. The credit card bills, $15,000 in total that Andrew explained away as temporary cash flow issues. Every single time I'd written the check. Every single time Susan would hug me and say, "You're the best, Dad." $35,000 over 8 years, and they needed a break from me. Around 3 a.m., I got up and walked to Susan's old bedroom. It's a guest room now, stripped of most of her personal stuff, but I'd kept a few photos on the wall. Call me sentimental. There was Susan at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, hugging me at Disneyland. I remember that trip. Linda had saved for months so we could afford it. Susan at 16, holding her first-place debate trophy, my arm around her shoulders. I was so proud that day. And Susan at 22, college graduation, her smile genuine and full of hope. I touched that last frame, the glass cool under my fingertips. When had that hopeful girl disappeared? When had she turned into someone who could look me in the eye and say she needed a break from her own father? Dawn came slow, gray light creeping through those old windows. Around 7 a.m., I heard voices downstairs. Quiet conversation. Susan and Andrew up early, talking in my kitchen. Now, here's something you might not know about old houses. If you know where to stand, the acoustics can be pretty good. I moved to the hallway, staying close to the wall, barefoot so the floorboards wouldn't creak. At the top of the stairs, their voices carried up clear as day. "We just need to approach it right," Susan was saying in that careful tone she uses when she's working an angle. I recognized it from watching her handle difficult customers at work. Make him think it's his idea. "He's sitting on equity he doesn't need," Andrew replied, and I could practically hear him rolling his eyes. "This house is way too big for one person anyway." I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath. "He's stubborn about it, though," Susan continued. "But if we frame it as simplifying his life, the old man doesn't have expensive taste. He'd probably be happier in a one-bedroom apartment somewhere." Susan's laugh came next, small and mean. "Did you see him tonight? He wore that same sport coat to my promotion dinner and my wedding. Same exact jacket." I looked back toward my bedroom where that jacket was hanging on the chair. She was right, of course. It was the same one. "Once we get the house sold," Susan said, her voice gaining confidence now, "we can pay off the credit cards and maybe look at that bigger place in Walnut Creek we talked about." "Your dad won't even notice the difference," Andrew said, and the way he twisted your dad made it sound like an insult. "He'll just be happy to help the family." Help the family that needed a break from me. The family that was planning to manipulate me into selling the house Linda and I had built our life in so they could upgrade their lifestyle. I went back to my bedroom with the same careful steps I'd used to approach the stairs, closed the door quietly, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. They should have been shaking after what I'd just heard. Instead, they were steady as rocks as I typed. Pine Ridge Lodge, Lake Tahoe for sale. The listing loaded up on my screen. Luxury lakefront property, 15 rooms, private beach access, established clientele. Asking price, $320,000. I scrolled through the photos. Pristine lake views, families laughing around fire pits, couples holding hands on wooden docks. The same resort where my family was planning their exclusive vacation, funded by my generosity and paid for with my dignity. Here's what Susan and Andrew didn't know, what nobody in my family knew. I wasn't the struggling retiree they thought I was. I opened my business banking account, the one registered under Hoffman Properties, LLC. Available liquid assets after keeping enough for operating expenses, $380,000. You see, after Linda died, I didn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I took every electrical job I could find, worked weekends and holidays, saved every extra penny. But I was also smart about it. I started buying properties. Small ones at first, fixer-uppers that other people didn't want to mess with. The cabin in South Lake Tahoe I bought in 2015 when my contractor buddy needed quick cash. I renovated it myself, new electrical, updated plumbing, refinished the floors, turned it into a vacation rental that booked solid from May through October. The duplex in Reno came next in 2018, another foreclosure special that I bought for $80,000 and put $25,000 into fixing up. Now it brings in $2,800 a month in rent. Then there's the cabin near Emerald Bay. Bought it as a complete disaster in 2020. Spent 6 months of my retirement turning it into something beautiful, worth twice what I paid for it now. Total current value of my little real estate empire, $850,000. All of it hidden under the LLC I'd registered using my middle name, Edward. All of it generating steady income while my family assumed I was just some old electrician living on Social Security and whatever pension scraps I could scrape together. I'd told them I was taking on extra electrical work to stay busy after Linda died. They never asked for details. Why would they? In their minds, I was just their reliable ATM, someone who'd always been there to solve their problems with my checkbook. $35,000 I'd given them over 8 years, and now they were planning to take the one thing I had left that connected me to Linda, our home. I opened my leather journal, the one where I track my property investments and rental income. On a fresh page I wrote, August 16th, Pine Ridge Lodge, $320,000. My handwriting was perfectly steady, no tremor, no hesitation. I stared at those numbers for a long moment, then pulled up the property details again. Owner retiring, motivated seller. Closing possible within 2 weeks. Contact Patricia Hayes, Mountain Properties Real Estate. Downstairs, Susan and Andrew were probably making coffee, planning their strategy for convincing me to downsize. They figured they had all the time in the world to work their angle. They had no idea what was coming. I looked at my laptop screen showing that beautiful lodge in the morning sunshine, and something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest. Not anger. Anger's too hot, too messy. This was something cleaner. This was clarity. I picked up my phone and called Patricia Hayes at 8 a.m. sharp. Her voice was professional but cautious. You know how real estate agents sound when they're not sure if you're serious or just wasting their time. Mr. Hoffman, Pine Ridge Lodge is a significant investment. When would you like to schedule a viewing? Today. I can be there by noon. There was a pause. That's very soon. You're driving up from Sacramento area. I'll leave within the hour. This is a serious inquiry, Mr. Hoffman. The property requires substantial capital. I have proof of funds and can close within 2 weeks. Her tone shifted immediately. I'll contact Mr. Mitchell right away. He'll be very pleased to hear from you. I hung up and printed the bank statements I'd need. The screen still showed those lodge photos, families gathered around fire pits, kids playing on private beaches, couples walking hand in hand along wooden docks. Across town, Susan and Andrew were probably having breakfast somewhere nice, celebrating their upcoming vacation. Pine Ridge Lodge, their private getaway, their break from the old man who'd embarrassed them with his dated house and worn jacket. They had no idea what was coming. The drive to Lake Tahoe took me 4 hours through mountain highways I knew like the back of my hand. 37 years as an electrical contractor, I'd wired vacation homes throughout these mountains. Every back road, every scenic overlook, every shortcut. This was my territory. Patricia Hayes met me at the lodge entrance. Mid-40s, firm handshake, the kind of efficient movements that told me she'd been closing deals in these mountains for years. Mr. Hoffman, welcome to Pine Ridge Lodge. The property was everything the photos had promised and more. 15 rooms arranged in a horseshoe around a central courtyard, each with private balconies overlooking the lake. The main lodge housed a restaurant and common areas. A stone path led down to private beach access, with a boat dock extending into crystal clear water. Henry Mitchell built this place 18 years ago, Patricia explained as we toured the restaurant. Put his heart and soul into it. But the market downturn hit him hard, and he needs to liquidate quickly. We walked the grounds slowly. She pointed out the renovated kitchenettes in each room, the private beach with its wooden stairs leading down to the water, the small restaurant that included breakfast with every stay. Her voice carried the hope of someone who wanted to make a sale but was managing expectations. The bones are solid, she said as we reached the dock. Occupancy runs about 65% during peak season, books consistently through Labor Day. Henry Mitchell emerged from the lodge office, and one look at him told me everything I needed to know. Shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. This was a man who'd watched his dream slowly die and was ready to let someone else take it over. Mr. Hoffman. His handshake was weak, defeated. Thank you for coming up on such short notice. When someone says they can close in 2 weeks, I make time. We walked back toward his office, past rooms with lake views and standard rooms facing the forest, the small fitness center with equipment that wasn't new but was well maintained. Everything functional, nothing failing, just waiting for the right owner. Henry's office was chaos, paperwork covering every surface, computers showing an outdated reservation system that probably hadn't been updated since 2015. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Patricia says you're serious about the asking price of $320,000. I am. I can close in 10 days, minimal contingencies, all cash. His fingers drummed once on the desk. That's more than acceptable. When can we start paperwork? I opened my briefcase and pulled out the financial documents I'd prepared during the drive up. Right now. Henry read through my bank statements slowly, his lips moving slightly. When he looked up, something had shifted in his expression, hope replacing despair. You're actually serious about this, completely. I slid my proof of funds across his desk, liquid assets, ready to transfer immediately. He read it twice, then set it down like he was handling something precious. I'll call my attorney right now. We can have preliminary documents ready by tomorrow morning. I stood and extended my hand. We'll close this by Friday, Henry. This time his handshake was firm. That evening, I met with Patricia's recommended attorney, a sharp woman named Carol Johnson who walked me through title documents and inspection reports with the efficiency of someone who'd done this dance many times before. She flagged the usual minor issues, permits needing renewal, vendor contracts that would transfer with ownership, staff employment agreements. The property is structurally sound, she concluded around 9 p.m. Financially distressed but solid bones. If you're comfortable with the accelerated timeline, I see no legal obstacles. Draw up the closing documents. I want to sign Friday morning. She nodded, already making notes. Thursday afternoon found us back in Henry's office. Him, me, Carol, and Henry's attorney handling the final review. Numbers aligned perfectly, documents signed and witnessed. I wired the deposit, $32,000, 10% down. Henry's hand actually trembled when we shook on the deal. You're saving my life, he said quietly. I didn't respond to that. This wasn't about saving anyone. This was about teaching a lesson. Friday morning, the final closing took exactly 3 hours. Wire transfers, title transfers, keys exchanged, ownership documents filed with El Dorado County. By noon, Pine Ridge Lodge belonged to Hoffman Properties, LLC. I sat alone in what was now my office, reviewing paperwork with the strange detachment of someone who'd just executed a plan that still felt surreal. Then I opened the reservation system and scrolled through August bookings. There it was, August 21st through 28th. Peterson party, 4 guests, deluxe lakefront suite, prepaid deposit, balance due at checkout. I took a photo of the screen, then called for Karen Stevens, the lodge manager Henry had introduced me to during the tour. She arrived within minutes, professional wariness written all over her face. New ownership meant uncertainty, and she was smart enough to be cautious. Karen, please sit down. She sat with her notepad ready, prepared to take notes or defend her position. I wasn't sure which. I'm keeping you as general manager. Your salary increases 20%, effective immediately. Her eyes widened. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. You'll earn it. I have specific instructions regarding operations, starting with some changes that take effect. August 21st. I pulled out the handwritten list I'd prepared during the drive up. These room reassignments and pricing adjustments take effect. August 21st. Karen scanned the list, her frown deepening with each line. These are significant changes, Mr. Hoffman. Some guests have already confirmed reservations at current rates. Ownership changed. Terms changed. California booking law allows modifications with 72 hours notice, correct? That's technically accurate, but guests won't be happy about. There's one reservation in particular I want you to focus on. August 21st, Peterson party, 4 guests. She pulled up her tablet and scrolled through the system. Yes, I see it. Deluxe lakefront suite, week-long stay. They booked 3 months ago. Change it. Standard room facing the forest, no lake view, and apply the new pricing structure, 40% increase across all services. Karen looked up slowly, and I could see her putting pieces together. But they've already confirmed at the old rate. This will more than double their total cost. New ownership, new terms. They'll be notified Monday morning. That gives them exactly 74 hours notice, well within legal requirements. She studied me for a long moment. This is personal, isn't it? I held her gaze steadily. This is business. Will you follow these instructions? Another pause, then she nodded. Yes, sir. Good. When they arrive and express surprise about the changes, you will inform them that I am the owner, not before they check in. I want them to experience the full impact first. Understood. I'm driving back to Sacramento tomorrow morning. You have my contact information for anything urgent. Otherwise, I trust your judgment on daily operations. She stood, still holding my list, clearly processing what this all meant. May I ask about the Peterson party? Who are they to you? Family, I said simply. They told me they needed a break from me. I'm making sure they get exactly what they asked for. Understanding dawned in her expression, followed by something that might have been sympathy or respect. She didn't ask any more questions. I'll make the changes today. After she left, I spent the rest of Friday afternoon learning the business. This wasn't just revenge theater. I'd bought a real operation, and I intended to run it properly. I reviewed staff files, vendor contracts, maintenance schedules. The lodge had good bones, solid systems, just needed an owner who cared about more than breaking even. That evening, I stood on the private beach, my shoes off, feet in sand still warm from the day's sun. The lake stretched out in front of me, mountain peaks reflected in water so clear you could see the bottom 20 feet down. In 3 days, Susan and Andrew would stand in this exact spot expecting their exclusive paradise vacation. They'd find something very different waiting. I drove back to Sacramento Saturday morning, arriving home before anyone could notice I'd been gone. My suitcase went straight to the back of my closet. The trip to Tahoe had taken exactly 48 hours total. Nobody had called, nobody had checked on me. By the time I made coffee Saturday morning, there was no evidence I'd ever left town. Susan showed up in my kitchen around 9 a.m., already in vacation mode. She had that distracted excitement I remembered from when she was younger, when Linda and I would take her camping in these same mountains. Dad, have you seen my blue hiking boots? I appeared from the hallway, boots in hand. Hall closet. I cleaned the mud off them after your last trip. She took them without meeting my eyes. Oh, thanks. I'd made her favorite coffee, the expensive French roast she likes, and set out real cream instead of the powdered stuff I usually use. Small gestures that used to mean something. Weather forecast looks perfect, I said, pulling up the 7-day outlook on my tablet. Low 80s, sunny all week. Perfect for the lake. Great, she said, barely looking up from her phone. I helped her pack through the morning, finding her favorite swimsuit, making sure her phone charger would work, folding clothes the way Linda had taught me 37 years ago. Each small action felt strange now, knowing what I knew, planning what I was planning. Andrew arrived around noon, hauling their shared luggage like he owned the place. He dropped into my recliner, the one Barbara had subtly mocked during dinner, and started scrolling through his phone. Travel's getting expensive, he said without looking up. We're already stretched pretty thin with this trip. There it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. I pulled out my wallet and counted $500 bills slowly, deliberately. Here, take this. $500 for spending money. Susan took the cash without hesitation, stuffing it into her purse like it was her due. Andrew watched this exchange and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "At least the old man's good for something." I smiled faintly and said nothing, if he only knew. They left around 2 p.m. to handle last-minute errands. I continued my performance, washing dishes, straightening up, playing the role of the lonely father resigned to a quiet weekend alone. Through my kitchen window, I watched Andrew's BMW disappear down the street. Then I went to my office and checked Karen's email updates. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Room reassignments, complete. Peterson party moved from deluxe lakefront suite to standard forest view room 8. Pricing updates, implemented across all services. Restaurant menu, room service, activities, everything increased 40%. The notification email was drafted and scheduled to send Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. Sunday evening, Susan called from Andrew's parents' house where they were all gathering for their early Monday departure. "Dad, we're leaving at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Just wanted to let you know. Have a wonderful time, honey." There was a pause, almost guilty. "We'll send photos. I'd like that very much." After hanging up, I sat in my living room, the same room they'd planned to force me out of, and allowed myself a moment of cold satisfaction. In 10 hours, they'd be loading George's SUV, excited about their exclusive family vacation. In 14 hours, they'd receive Karen's email about ownership changes and policy updates. By the time they understood what had happened, they'd be halfway to Tahoe with no way to turn back. And I'd be here, sitting in my modest house with my old furniture, waiting for the phone call I knew would come. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait. Monday morning, Karen's email went out at exactly 8 a.m. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and watching my neighbor walk his dog, everything perfectly normal and peaceful. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, my family was about to get the shock of their lives. At 8:47 a.m., my phone rang. Susan's name lit up the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering, just to let the tension build. "Hello, Susan." Heavy breathing on the other end, shaky and confused. Then, "Dad, did you buy Pine Ridge Lodge?" "I did." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear Andrew's voice in the background, getting louder and more agitated by the second. "When?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Last Friday. We're already in the car, Dad. We've been driving for 2 hours." "I know. The email says our room changed. And the prices." I could hear papers rustling, probably Andrew grabbing his phone to look at the email again. New ownership, new policies. Standard business practice. "This is insane." Her voice was breaking now, that same tone she'd used as a teenager when she didn't get her way. Why would you do this to us? You wanted a vacation without me, Susan? Now you have one. We can't afford these new prices. Andrew's having what looks like a panic attack over here. Then perhaps you should have considered that before telling me you needed a break from your own father. Dad, please. Now she was crying, and part of me, the part that remembered teaching her to ride a bike and helping with homework, wanted to give in. "We're sorry about the dinner. We were wrong to say that. Can you please just change everything back? I'll see you when you check in, Susan. Enjoy Pine Ridge Lodge." I hung up. The drive to Tahoe took me 3 hours this time. I knew exactly where I was going and what I needed to do. I arrived at the lodge just after noon, and Karen met me in the office immediately. "They've called 6 times since this morning," she reported, professional concern written all over her face. "The son-in-law demanded to speak with you directly. I told them you'd be available at check-in." "Perfect. How are the other guests handling things?" "No issues at all. Actually, we had 2 new bookings yesterday when people saw our updated amenities pricing. Your policy changes are well within industry standards." I nodded, reviewing the reservation system on her computer. "What time do you expect the Peterson party? Their check-in is scheduled for 3 p.m. I'll be in the office." When they arrive, treat them exactly like any other guests. Professional, courteous, but firm about all policies. Understood. At 2:45 p.m., I positioned myself at the office window with legitimate operational reports spread across the desk. I was genuinely reviewing vendor contracts and maintenance schedules. This was a real business now, and other guests deserved proper service. At 3:12 p.m., George's silver SUV pulled into the parking lot like a storm cloud rolling in. 4 doors opened simultaneously, and I watched my family emerge into the afternoon mountain sunshine. Susan stepped out first, shading her eyes and looking around like she was searching for hidden cameras. Andrew followed, his jaw already set in that aggressive expression I'd seen during family arguments. George and Barbara climbed out of the back seat, George checking his phone while Barbara started taking photos of the lodge entrance. They approached the main building with the careful tension of people walking into what they suspected was an ambush. Through the office window, I could see them enter the lobby. Karen moved to the reception desk with the professional composure I'd come to expect from her. I couldn't hear the conversation, but body language told the whole story. Andrew's aggressive posture as he slapped his credit card on the counter, Karen's patient explanation of the room changes and policy updates, Susan's growing agitation as she realized this wasn't some mistake they could argue their way out of, George and Barbara whispering urgently to each other, probably trying to figure out what was happening. Then Andrew pointed directly toward the office, toward me. I stood up, straightened my work shirt and jeans, and walked into the lobby. The conversation stopped dead. 4 faces turned toward me like I was an apparition they couldn't quite believe they were seeing. "Dad?" Susan's voice carried genuine bewilderment. "Hello, Susan." "Andrew." I nodded to each of them in turn. "George, Barbara, welcome to Pine Ridge Lodge. What are you doing here?" Andrew's voice had that edge it gets when he's trying to control a situation that's spinning away from him. "I work here." "You work here?" He actually laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound that echoed off the wooden walls of the lobby. "What, you got a job at our resort just to spy on us?" "I own it. You know that moment in movies when everything goes completely silent? That's exactly what happened." Even the background music from the restaurant seemed to pause. "Own it?" Susan's voice was barely audible. "As of last Friday, Pine Ridge Lodge is owned by Hoffman Properties, LLC. George moved closer to Barbara, pulling out his phone and starting to whisper urgently. Andrew stared at me like I'd just announced I was from another planet. "This is harassment," Andrew said finally, his voice rising enough that other guests in the lobby turned to look. "This is stalking. I want you removed from this property immediately. I am the property owner," I replied calmly. "You are my guests." That's when Karen stepped forward smoothly, and I had to admire her professionalism. "Mr. Hoffman purchased the lodge last week. All existing reservations are being honored with the policy adjustments outlined in this morning's email notification." "This is completely insane," Andrew said, his voice getting louder. A couple sitting near the fireplace was openly staring now. "This can't be legal." "Ownership transitions are standard in the hospitality industry," Karen replied without missing a beat. "Your confirmation number is in our system. Everything is properly documented." Andrew pulled out his phone and started typing frantically. "I'm calling a lawyer right now. You're certainly welcome to do that," I said. "In the meantime, your rooms are ready. Karen will complete your check-in." Susan moved closer to me, her eyes searching my face like she was looking for some trace of the father she thought she knew. "How could you afford this place? I've been saving money for a while." "Saving?" Andrew's voice cracked. "You drive a 10-year-old truck. You wear the same clothes to every family event. You live in a house that hasn't been updated since the Clinton administration. Appearances can be deceiving, Andrew." Karen slid 2 key cards across the polished counter. "You're in rooms 8 and 10, second floor. Continental breakfast is served from 6 to 10 a.m. in the restaurant. The fitness center closes at 9 p.m. Andrew snatched the key cards like they were evidence in a criminal trial. "These aren't the lakefront rooms we booked. We specifically requested the deluxe suite with private deck access. Due to ownership transition and property updates, some room reassignments were necessary," Karen explained with infinite patience. "These accommodations meet all stated standards in your original confirmation." "The stated standards have changed," George said quietly, reading something on his phone. "This morning's email. Look at these prices. Are posted and legally implemented according to California hospitality law," I finished for him. "I hope you enjoy your stay." I turned and walked back toward the office, leaving them standing there with their luggage and their shock. Behind me, I could hear Andrew's voice rising again, Karen's calm responses, and Susan asking in a small voice, "How long have you owned this place?" But I didn't turn around. The first move was complete. Now they'd discover exactly what new ownership really meant. From my office window, I watched them haul their luggage up to the second floor, their movements slow and shell-shocked. The family that had excluded me from their vacation was now staying in my hotel, subject to my policies, completely dependent on my hospitality. About 10 minutes later, I heard the first complaint through the lodge's security monitor I'd installed in my office. Not for spying, mind you, but for general property management. Susan's voice carried clearly from room 8. "This isn't what we booked," she was saying, and I could picture her standing at the window, staring out at the parking lot instead of the lake view they'd expected. The standard rooms were perfectly adequate, clean, comfortable, functional. They just weren't the deluxe lakefront suite with private deck and panoramic lake views that they'd been dreaming about for months. Instead, they got a nice view of where people parked their cars and a maintenance shed that could use a fresh coat of paint. Andrew's voice boomed from room 10, where he and his parents were settling in. "This is a joke. The bathroom's barely big enough for one person, and look at this ancient air conditioning unit." Now the AC worked fine. I'd had all the units serviced just last month. It was just louder than the newer, quieter models in the premium rooms, and it cycled on and off more frequently, which some people found annoying when they were trying to sleep. George appeared in the hallway, still in his travel clothes, looking haggard. The Wi-Fi password they gave us isn't working. That was technically true. The Wi-Fi worked perfectly in the common areas, lobby, restaurant, pool deck, but the signal had always been weaker on the second floor, especially in rooms 8 and 10. Something about the building's construction and where the routers were positioned. I'd been meaning to upgrade the system, but it hadn't been a priority until now. By dinner time, they'd discovered more of the lodge's quirks. The water pressure in their rooms was adequate but not impressive, about what you'd expect in a mountain lodge built 18 years ago. The mini-fridges were older models that hummed loudly enough to notice at night. The coffee makers in their rooms worked, but only made one cup at a time and slowly. None of these things violated any hospitality standards. Everything functioned exactly as it should. It just wasn't the luxury experience they'd been anticipating. They attempted dinner in the lodge restaurant that evening, and I made sure I was visible, sitting at a corner table with genuine business paperwork spread in front of me. I was actually reviewing maintenance contracts and staff schedules, running a real business while staying in their line of sight. When their menus arrived, Andrew's expression changed immediately. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through screenshots he'd obviously saved from the old website pricing. Our server approached when Andrew signaled, and I recognized the patience in her voice, the kind hospitality workers use when they know they're about to deliver bad news. "Excuse me, but these prices don't match what we saw on your website. The website was updated yesterday morning, sir. All current pricing is reflected on tonight's menu. I watched this exchange while pretending to review vendor contracts." Andrew looked across the restaurant at me, probably hoping I'd intervene. I continued signing forms like I hadn't noticed. A simple dinner for 4 people. Nothing fancy, just entrees and drinks. Came to $240 before tip. I watched Barbara's face when the bill arrived. She looked like she'd tasted something bitter. "This is highway robbery," Andrew muttered, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, but they paid it. What choice did they have? The nearest restaurant was 15 miles down the mountain, and they'd already had a long day. That night brought new challenges. At precisely 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, our maintenance crew began their scheduled work on the heating system. The pipes ran through the walls adjacent to rooms 8 and 10, and the sound was, well, let's call it noticeable. I happened to be conducting my morning property inspection at 6:15 a.m. when George emerged from room 10 in his bathrobe, hair standing at odd angles, looking like he hadn't slept well. "Morning, George. Sorry about the noise. Necessary maintenance work. Should be wrapped up by 8 a.m. He blinked at me, too exhausted to form a coherent response. The maintenance was legitimate, by the way. We did need to service the heating system before the busy fall season. The timing was just convenient. By Tuesday afternoon, I could see the strain showing. Susan sat alone by the pool during the brief window when it was open for guest use. We'd had to schedule cleaning and chemical balancing from 2 to 4 p.m., prime afternoon relaxation hours. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Andrew paced around the lodge grounds with his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling anyone he could think of who might help him out of this situation. Every conversation seemed to end with him hanging up in frustration. George and Barbara huddled together on the lodge deck, whispering intensely. I caught fragments of their conversation when I walked past. Something about affordable alternatives and cutting the trip short, and how did we not know about this? They were starting to blame each other. The pressure was working exactly as I'd designed it to. That evening, Susan tried a different approach. She appeared at my office door around 7 p.m., looking more like the daughter I remembered from years past. "Dad, could we talk?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Of course." She sat down, hands folded in her lap like a child who knows she's in trouble. "This whole thing, I know you're angry about what we said at dinner, and you have every right to be. I waited, but this is our family vacation. We saved for months. Andrew's parents were so excited. They've been telling all their neighbors about this trip. I'm sure they have. Can't we just start over? Pretend the dinner never happened? Go back to the way things were?" I looked at her for a long moment. The way things were was you taking my money for years and then telling me you needed a break from me. Which part of that would you like to go back to?" Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. "How did you mean it, Susan?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to find words that would make her actions sound better. "Your rooms are comfortable and clean," I continued. "Your reservation is being honored. You're receiving exactly the vacation you paid for under the new ownership structure. But the prices reflect current market rates for a property of this caliber." She stood up slowly, defeat written in every line of her body. "This isn't you, Dad. This isn't the man who raised me." "Maybe," I said, turning back to my paperwork, "this is exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look close enough to see it." She left without another word. From my office window, I watched her walk across the courtyard to rejoin her family, shoulders slumped, hope extinguished. 3 more days until checkout. 3 more days until they'd face the final bill that would show them exactly what their break from me had really cost. Wednesday brought the breaking point. Andrew had spent Tuesday night documenting everything, timing room service delays with his phone's stopwatch, photographing the parking lot view from their window, recording video of the Wi-Fi connection dropping during what should have been peak hours. He was building some kind of case, though I wasn't sure what he thought he could prove. Everything I'd implemented fell within acceptable hotel operations. Maintenance happened. Wi-Fi had occasional outages. Kitchens experienced delays during busy periods. There was no violation of any standard or regulation, just consistent, grinding inconvenience. But Andrew was a man used to getting his way, and he wasn't going down without a fight. He cornered me near the reception desk Wednesday morning, laptop open, showing me his documentation like he was presenting evidence to a jury. "The Wi-Fi in our rooms hasn't worked properly once," he said, voice tight with controlled anger. "Your staff keeps saying they'll fix it, but nothing changes." I glanced at his screen showing connection screenshots. Karen mentioned we're having some technical issues with the service provider. The business center and lobby areas have reliable connections if you need internet access. This is ridiculous. We're paying premium rates for substandard service. You're paying current market rates for a mountain lodge. I don't control the telecommunications infrastructure for this area. He slammed his laptop shut hard enough that other guests looked over. "This is all deliberate. You're targeting us specifically. Andrew, you're a guest at my hotel. I treat all guests according to the same policies and procedures." But he was past listening to reason. He stormed back upstairs, and within an hour, I knew exactly what his next move would be. Karen appeared in my office with a concerned expression. "Sir, you should know the Peterson party posted several negative reviews overnight." I wasn't surprised. "How bad are they?" 1-star ratings across 3 platforms. The language is aggressive. They're making accusations about discrimination and personal vendetta. Are any of their specific allegations factually accurate? No, sir. Everything we've done follows standard hospitality practices. But the tone is quite hostile. I pulled up the reviews on my computer. George and Barbara's was bitter and dramatic. Owner has personal relationship with guests and deliberately provides inferior service based on family conflicts. Discriminatory treatment. Unprofessional management. Avoid this property at all costs. Andrew's review was longer and tried to sound legal. Clear conflict of interest situation. Owner purchased property specifically to target certain guests. Unauthorized price increases. Breach of contract regarding room assignments. We'll be pursuing this through proper legal channels. Susan's was the one that stung, though I didn't let it show. My father bought this hotel just to ruin our family vacation. This isn't about business, it's about revenge. The man I thought I knew would never be this cruel. I read them all twice, staying analytical rather than emotional. They were desperate, grasping for any weapon they could find. Draft professional responses to each one, I told Karen. Acknowledge their dissatisfaction, reference the ownership transition period, but don't engage with specific accusations. Keep everything factual and business-focused. Already working on it. Should I have you review them before posting? Yes. And Karen, make sure our responses go live during peak browsing hours. Late morning after people have had their coffee. My responses, which we crafted carefully over the next hour, were models of professional restraint. We sincerely regret this guest's disappointment with their recent stay. Ownership transitions occasionally require operational adjustments as we work to enhance service standards for all guests. We value all feedback and remain committed to providing quality mountain hospitality. We encourage guests with specific concerns to contact management directly for resolution. Professional, unassailable, completely untouchable. By Thursday morning, something interesting had happened. Our responses had attracted attention from potential guests who appreciated our transparency about the ownership transition. We'd actually gained 2 new bookings from people who read the negative reviews, saw our measured responses, and figured we were probably the reasonable party in whatever family drama was playing out. Andrew discovered this when he checked the reviews that morning and saw that his 1-star ratings were being offset by new 5-star reviews from recent guests praising our authentic mountain lodge experience and honest, straightforward management. That's when he really lost it. Thursday afternoon, I watched from my office as he marched across the lodge courtyard toward a car that had just pulled up. A man in a suit got out, obviously Andrew's attorney, based on the briefcase and the serious expression. They spent 45 minutes sitting in the lodge's common area, Andrew gesticulating wildly while the lawyer took notes and occasionally shook his head. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could read the attorney's body language, and it wasn't encouraging for Andrew's case. When they finished, I saw the lawyer shake Andrew's hand in that polite but final way that says, "I've told you everything I can do," which is nothing. After the attorney left, Andrew sat alone in the common area for another hour, staring at his phone, probably researching other legal options and finding none. That evening brought the family meeting. I could see them gathered on the lodge deck from my office window, all 4 of them huddled around a table, voices low but body language tense. Susan was crying again. George kept checking his wallet like he was calculating how much cash they had left. Barbara sat with her arms crossed, looking furious at the world. They were fragmenting, just as I'd intended. The pressure was working exactly as designed. Around 10 p.m., my office phone rang. Susan's name on the caller ID. "Dad, we need to talk." Her voice was different now, not angry, not pleading, just hollow, empty. About what? About ending this. About what it's going to take to make this stop. "I'm not sure what you mean, Susan. You're guests at my hotel. Your reservation runs through Saturday. Nothing needs to stop." "How much?" she asked quietly. "How much money do you want us to pay for this to be over?" I looked out my office window at the lake, moonlight reflecting off the still water. "I don't want your money, Susan." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to experience exactly what you asked for. A vacation without me interfering in your family time. We get it, okay? We understand. You've made your point." "Have I? Because yesterday you asked me to pretend our dinner conversation never happened. That doesn't sound like understanding to me." The line went quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to figure that out yourself." I hung up and watched through the window as she rejoined her family on the deck. The conversation that followed was animated, desperate. I could see Andrew pacing, George shaking his head, Barbara pointing in the direction of my office. 2 more days until checkout. 2 more days until they'd see the final bill and understand the true cost of their break from me. The lesson was almost complete. Friday morning brought checkout day and the final confrontation I'd been orchestrating all week. Karen called my office at 8 a.m. with the update I'd been expecting. "They're requesting early checkout, sir. Want to leave today instead of tomorrow." Trying to escape a day early? That's my impression. Should I accommodate them? Absolutely. But remind them that our cancellation policy requires full payment for all reserved nights regardless of early departure. 7 days as originally booked. Understood. At 10 a.m., I watched from my office window as they loaded their luggage with the grim efficiency of people fleeing a disaster. George moved slowly, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Barbara kept her sunglasses on despite being indoors, probably hiding the evidence of tears or sleepless nights. Andrew's jaw was set in that rigid way that meant he was barely controlling his temper. Susan walked last, shoulders curved inward, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. They approached the reception desk like defendants awaiting sentencing. I gave them a few minutes to gather around Karen's desk before making my entrance. When I walked into the lobby, the conversation stopped dead. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "I understand you'd like to settle your account before departing." Andrew stepped forward immediately, credit card in hand like a weapon. We want to check out. Now. And we want an itemized breakdown of every charge. Of course. I nodded to Karen, who had the bill ready. She placed it face down on the counter and slid it toward Andrew with practiced professionalism. He picked it up with forced confidence, flipped it over, and his face went completely white. This says $2,100. That's correct, Karen confirmed. 7 nights accommodation, dining expenses, room service, resort fees, and incidentals. Everything is itemized according to current rate structures. I watched Andrew's hands start to shake slightly as he scanned the breakdown. We budgeted $800 for this entire trip. Budget planning is the responsibility of the guest, I said calmly. All pricing was communicated according to legal notification requirements. This is extortion, he said, voice rising. Other guests in the lobby turned to stare. This is hospitality, I replied. You received accommodation, meals, and services. The bill reflects your usage. That's when the real drama started. Andrew pulled out his credit card and slapped it on the counter, jabbing at the card reader with enough force to crack it. The machine beeped. Declined. He tried again, entering his PIN manually this time, pressing each number like he was attacking it. Declined again. His face flushed red as he yanked out a different card, probably his backup, the one they saved for emergencies. The terminal rejected that one too. George stepped forward hesitantly. Son, maybe... No, Andrew snapped. We're not asking them for money. But George was already reaching for his wallet, pulling out a credit card with hands that trembled slightly. He inserted it into the reader, entered his PIN, waited for the processing screen. Declined. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Even the background music seemed to have stopped. That's when Susan stepped forward. She didn't speak, didn't look at Andrew or her father-in-law, just handed Karen her credit card and stared at the wall while the transaction processed. The machine hummed for what felt like forever. Then, approved. Susan took the receipt, folded it without looking at the total, and put it in her purse with the mechanical movements of someone in shock. Thank you for staying with us, Karen said with professional courtesy. We hope you enjoyed your time at Pine Ridge Lodge. They gathered their luggage in heavy silence. No one spoke as they loaded George's SUV in the parking lot. I watched from the lobby window as they arranged themselves in the same seats they'd arrived in, but they weren't the same family anymore. Before they drove away, Susan appeared at the lobby entrance one last time. She walked toward me slowly, like someone approaching a grave. Are you satisfied now? She asked quietly. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. 5 days had aged her. The confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable that reminded me of the child she'd been before life taught her to take things for granted. Are you? I asked back. I don't understand what you mean. Are you satisfied with who you've become? With how you treat people? With what you think love looks like? Her eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Susan. For years. Not just at that dinner, but every time you took my help for granted. Every time you saw me as a resource instead of a person. Every time you forgot that I have feelings too. I'm sorry. The words came out broken, barely audible. I know you are. But sorry doesn't mean much if you don't understand what you're apologizing for. She stood there for a long moment, tears flowing freely now. What happens now? Now you go home. You deal with your bills and your problems and your marriage without my money propping everything up. You figure out who you are when you can't fall back on taking advantage of your father's love. Will you ever forgive me? I thought about that question, really thought about it. That depends on what you learn from this and what you do with it. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Susan. That's why this had to happen. She walked back to the SUV where her family waited. Through the windows, I could see them all sitting in silence, staring straight ahead. As they drove away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or revenge, but sadness. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because it had been necessary in the first place. I spent the weekend at the lodge, learning the business, working with staff, handling the genuine needs of other guests. By Sunday afternoon, I was genuinely tired from real work, not from orchestrating family drama. The reviews had stabilized. Our professional responses had attracted more positive attention than their negative complaints had driven away. The business was actually stronger than when I'd bought it. Monday morning, I drove back to Sacramento. Karen's final report showed that we'd gained 3 new advance bookings over the weekend from families who appreciated our authentic mountain lodge experience and responsive management. It was Tuesday evening when my phone finally rang with the call I'd been expecting, Susan's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, Susan. Hello, Susan." Her voice was different than it had been at the lodge, not hollow or desperate, but quiet in a way that suggested she'd been doing some serious thinking. "Dad, Andrew, and I are getting divorced." I sat down in my recliner, the same one Andrew had mocked during that dinner. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. And honestly, you shouldn't be. This whole thing, what happened at the lodge, it didn't cause our problems, but it sure showed me what they were." She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. "He spent the entire drive home blaming me for not controlling you. Said it was my fault for not managing the family situation better. Like you were some kind of pet I should have kept on a leash." I said nothing, just listened. Then he started going through our finances, trying to figure out where we could cut expenses to pay for the trip. You know what he suggested first? That we stop helping you with your house maintenance. Can you believe that? After everything you've done for us over the years, he wanted to cut off the tiny bit we actually contributed back. "Susan, let me finish, please. I need to say this." Her voice gained strength. "I've been living in a fantasy, Dad. Thinking I was this independent, successful woman when really I was just taking. Taking your money, taking your help, taking your love, and giving back what? Criticism about your clothes? Complaints about your house? Telling you we needed a break from you?" The pain in her voice was real, and part of me wanted to make it easier for her, but she needed to work through this herself. "I found a credit counselor," she continued. "Did you know we owe $25,000 on credit cards?" $25,000, Dad. Most of it from the last 6 months when Andrew was so confident about his sales numbers and kept saying we'd pay everything off with his bonus. That's a lot of debt, Susan. It's more than I make in half a year. And you know what the counselor asked me? She asked what family support we had, what resources we could draw on, and I started to give her your phone number like it was automatic. Like, of course, my dad would bail us out again. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Then I remembered what you said at the lodge, about figuring out who I am when I can't fall back on taking advantage of your love. So I didn't give her your number. I felt something shift in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but the first hint that maybe, just maybe, she was finally understanding. "What did you do instead?" "I got a second job, evenings and weekends at a retail store. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work and it'll help pay down the debt. I also moved out of the house Andrew and I were renting. I'm staying in a studio apartment now. It's tiny, but I can afford it on my own." That sounds like a good start. "Dad?" Her voice got smaller. "I know I don't have any right to ask this, but could I come to dinner? This Friday? Just me. I'll cook. I still remember some of Mom's recipes. We need to start over, and I don't know how else to begin." I looked around my living room, the same room where they'd mocked my furniture and planned my exile, the same house they'd wanted to force me to sell. It felt different now, not because anything had changed about it, but because I had reclaimed my own dignity within these walls. Same time as that last dinner? Yes. But Dad? I want you to know. I'm not coming because I need money or help or anything like that. I'm coming because I want to try to earn back the right to be your daughter. After I hung up, I sat in that old recliner for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The lodge business was thriving. Karen sent weekly reports showing steady bookings and positive reviews. My little real estate empire was generating reliable income. At 62, I was probably more financially secure than I'd ever been. But more than that, I'd proven something to myself. I'd shown that respect isn't automatic, even from family. That love without boundaries isn't really love at all. It's just enablement. And that sometimes the people you care about most need to face consequences before they can truly change. Friday evening came, and Susan knocked on my door at exactly 7 p.m. She looked different. Not just the absence of expensive clothes and perfect makeup, but something deeper. There was a humility in her posture that I hadn't seen since she was a child. "Hi, Dad." I opened the door wider. "Come in." She'd brought groceries in a simple paper bag, ingredients for Linda's famous lasagna, the one we used to make together when Susan was learning to cook. She moved around my kitchen with careful respect, asking permission to use this pan or that utensil, treating my space like it belonged to someone she was just getting to know. We worked together in companionable silence, layering noodles and cheese and meat sauce the way Linda had taught us both. It felt like a ritual, not just making dinner but rebuilding something that had been broken. "The lodge looked beautiful in those photos," she said quietly as we waited for the lasagna to bake. "I looked it up online after we got home. It's a good business. I'm learning a lot about hospitality. I saw some of the reviews. People really love it there." She paused. "They love how you treat them." I nodded. Respect goes both ways. When you treat people well, they usually return the favor. We ate dinner at the same table where this whole story had started, but the dynamic was completely different. Susan asked about my day, listened to my answers, shared stories about her new job and her tiny apartment. She didn't ask for money or help or anything except the chance to slowly rebuild trust. When she got ready to leave, she hugged me, really hugged me, not the quick, distracted embraces of the past few years. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. "I never gave up on you, Susan. I just stopped enabling you. There's a difference. I know that now." After she left, I walked through my house, my protected, legally secured house that no one could ever force me to sell. The dated curtains still hung in the windows. The old furniture still filled the rooms. Nothing had changed about the physical space, but everything felt different. This was never about revenge, not really. It was about teaching someone I loved that respect matters, that people have dignity regardless of their bank balance or their wardrobe, and that sometimes love means setting boundaries that hurt in the short term but heal in the long run. Susan came back the next Friday and the Friday after that. Each visit, she seemed a little more like the daughter I'd raised and a little less like the person who'd taken my love for granted. Maybe we'd find our way back to each other, maybe we wouldn't. But at least now, if we did rebuild our relationship, it would be based on mutual respect instead of financial dependency. And that was worth more than all the money I'd ever given her. The lake house was just the beginning. What really mattered was what came after. The slow, difficult work of becoming a family again, but this time as equals who chose to love each other, not as an ATM and his customer. That was the real victory.